Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country presented by Harrah's Auction Casino. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale, and let's be honest, Shane, after what we had on last week's show, Barrett Baker, Brad Brennan, and a guest appearance at his lake house by Brent Brennan, I mean, there's nothing that we can do this week that's going to be able to top that.
Well, truthfully, Eric, we don't want to spoil our audience, so you're just going to get us this week, and really, that's all you need. I mean, what more could you ask for? It's really everything else is a bonus. But yeah, we have a lot to talk about. We're going to have some great guests on before leading up to the beginning of football season. We're all in on football now. But yeah, it's going to be us. We got a lot to chat about. I'm looking forward to it. Did my homework. Let's do it.
Yeah, this is a football-centric show. We're going to break it down, and it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts and mine as to, we're going to go position by position. Has Arizona improved over last season on paper in every particular position? We will break that down. But this is our version of buy or sell, which is presented by our friends at Ice Shaker. Go to iceshaker.com, use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, and get $5 off your first purchase. Afterwards, make sure to fill out the post-purchase survey, whether you find that on the website or if you get that via email, make sure to fill that out for us. Please, I got a note from somebody that mentioned that they had purchased an ice shaker last week and took the plunge, as they said. And congratulations on that. And let me tell you, you will not regret it.
Best decision you'll ever make, other than listening to the show. Yep.
You bet. Well, that's right. All right. Number one in buyer. So we're going to do offense in this first segment.
Yep.
So if Arizona has improved over last year on paper at each position, you buy it. And if you think they've declined, then you sell it. And let's start with the quarterback position. We know that Noah Fafita we know what he is, where we didn't know this a year ago, but you have Braden Dorman and some untested players behind him. Whereas last year you had Jayden de Laura, who was a veteran quarterback for Washington State prior to Arizona. So buy or sell, Shane, the quarterback position at Arizona?
Yeah, well, I'll certainly buy the starting quarterback, but I'm going to sell the depth to what you kind of alluded to. You don't need me to tell you how good Noah Fafita was last season. They did lose some key pass catchers, which we'll get to soon. But Noah Fafita is a star. Health permitting, there's no reason he shouldn't be at least as good this season, even with the coaching change. I think the biggest loss for Arizona after Jedd Fisch moved on to Washington was Damon Williams. He never played a snap for Arizona, but he was the obvious heir apparent to Noah Fafita and looked like someone who could play right away if needed. We talked to Matt Moreno about who sang his praises multiple times on this show. But with Williams moving on to Washington, you mentioned Braden Dorman, who was a 4-star guy coming out of high school. We haven't seen him yet, but he's pretty well touted quarterback. And you've got a couple transfers in Anthony Garcia from San Jose State, then Adam DeMonte from NAU, none of whom seem likely to start for Arizona unless they have to this season or maybe even beyond. So the drop-off from Fafita to QB2, whoever that is, does concern me a lot. That's true for most programs, but in Arizona's included. Hopefully it's not a situation Arizona will be faced with this season. Like you mentioned before, Arizona has had pretty good luck injury-wise last year, and they're going to need the same luck this year.
Yeah, I'm going to buy this one, and it seems like kind of a weird buy, but the fact that Noah Fafita is a proven product and is probably considered one of the top 25 quarterbacks in college football right now.
Yeah.
Last year, going into the year, you couldn't say that. You knew you had a good high school player, and you had Jayden de Laura, who was a risk-reward type of player. But now with Noah, you know you have an elite quarterback. Now, if he goes down, Arizona is in much worse shape, likely, than they were last year. So it's kind of a hard buy or sell because the depth at the position, you don't have somebody likely in Dorman. The reports have not been great on him, from what I have heard. But at this point, I don't know how you can last year go from a guy that was not a top 25 quarterback to one that is and probably higher than that. I think you almost have to buy. And the fact if you need to keep Noah Fafita healthy, that is most important, I think, all season for Arizona. It's the number one priority for the Wildcats.
Absolutely. And it'll be interesting if Arizona does get comfortable leads in either of their first two games, and hopefully they will. Be interesting to see who comes on to quarterback, if anyone else for Arizona, and who that first guy would be, because that might give you a glimpse into who the QB2 is. But certainly would like to see if it's Dorman, who would seem to me to be the obvious choice, but maybe he's not. It'd be nice to see him get some reps in a real game situation if the opportunity arises.
I mean, Noah has to stay healthy. There I mean, Arizona is likely, Shane, screwed if he gets hurt.
Well,
Likely.
I think they're back to being about as good as they probably would have been last year with Jaden Delar, which is to say like a 500 team. I think with him, certainly they're a couple of games above that.
All right, let's talk about running backs.
Yeah.
This is an interesting one. You had Jonah Coleman last year. You had Michael Wiley last year. Speedy Luke is still in the fold here.
Yep.
But this year, without Coleman, we know he's at Washington. You had Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, otherwise known as Bill, and you have Paulie Conley from San Jose State, as well as Kedrick Riscano from Ole Miss. To me, it's a buy. How about you?
Well, we've already compared this year's running back room to last year. So you had a similar question a few weeks ago. And I think it's very comparable in talent and depth, despite the roster turnover, like you mentioned. They lose Jonah Coleman. Michael Wiley and DJ Williams are gone. They pick up arguably the best two running backs in the transfer portal outside of Jonah Coleman in Krosky Merritt and Conley, and then Riscano from Ole Miss, along with Speedy Luke returning. So I don't want to contradict myself from a few weeks ago because I said that I would lean toward taking last year's group over this year's. So I will very marginally sell because I still slightly prefer last year's group until proven otherwise. We've seen what they can do at Arizona. We haven't seen the other guys in an Arizona uniform yet on this team. But I'll say this: it's not a position I'm concerned about at all. I think they've done a great job restocking the running back room, and I think they're in great shape in terms of both talent and depth at the running back position.
I'm actually going to buy it, Shane. I mean, Jonah Coleman was good. Michael Wiley was excellent, as a pass catcher, especially against ASU the last 2 years. But the depth at this position, Krosky Merritt, Conley, Reese Cano, Luke. I mean, these guys, Luke is probably your third down guy, but these other three guys are you can go any way on these guys.
Yeah.
Any one of them could be the guy. Now, don't forget about DJ Williams, who was a productive player for the Wildcats as well as kind of that inside guy. But Quali Conley and Krosky Merritt were productive in the Mountain West.
Yeah.
And I don't see any reason they probably shouldn't be in this offense. So it's a slight buy, but I mean, maybe it's Jonah Coleman, kind of anti-Jonah Coleman sentiment, kind of feeling like he's a traitor. But then again, San Jose State people could say that about Conley. At this point, I'm rolling with a slight buy on the running backs this time.
That's fair. And I, the trader thing, if you want to apply it to Jed Fish all day, I'm not going to stop you. Coleman, I know he was really close with Scotty Graham. And so I certainly understand making that leap there. I think, it's a close relationship that went beyond football. And so I get that. He's probably, and that's is probably the main reason why he was just one of a handful of guys to make the jump from Arizona to Washington, at least among the guys who had actually played at Arizona before.
All right, let's talk about the wide receivers. This is a really tough call. I'm going to let you go first on here. You have Tetairoa McMillan, who's arguably an All-American, dominant.
Arguably the best wide receiver in college football. You could certainly
definitely
make that argument.
Top 3, top 4, top 5 for sure. Yep. But you lose a guy in Jake Cowing, who was also a star college player, eventually became a draft pick of the San Francisco 49ers. They added a couple guys. I mean, Montana Lamonius Craig didn't really break out that much. Malachi Riley maybe is a breakout guy, but he was there last year. Devin Hyatt, redshirt freshman. They added a guy in this kid from back east, Raymelo Murphy. I think he was Old Dominion. So buy or sell, Shane, the wide receivers on paper are better than they were going into 2023.
Well, it's kind of crazy to sell the position just because, it's the position that Tetairoa McMillan plays at, but I will because of the depth concerns. And we're talking about all receivers, not just wide receivers, but tight
end as well.
Tight end.
Losing Tanner McLaughlin. Yeah.
Losing McLaughlin and Cowing is it's a big deal. There's no way around it. Lamonius Craig was a strong third wide receiver last year, and hopefully will take a step forward in Cowing's absence. And I think they do have a lot of potential in Malachi Riley and AJ Jones, who could see more playing time. And they have some depth behind those guys as well. Like they have a lot of guys to choose from. So there's just the numbers suggest there's a good chance at least one of those guys will emerge into a top contributor this year for Noah Fifita. But losing Cowing in the slot is massive nonetheless. And then at tight end, they have several guys who also have potential but don't have the numbers to show for it yet. Keon Burnett, who was a guest on the show a couple of years ago, he's returning to Arizona after flirting with the transfer portal. But we haven't seen a lot of him, even though he was a big name recruit coming to Arizona, and McLaughlin obviously had a lot to do with that. But Burnett's connection he has with Noah Fifita, because he's a Servite guy too, Maybe that pays off starting this season if now that McLaughlin's gone. But I can't imagine Arizona will be as good at that position with McLaughlin moving on to the NFL. You throw in Cowing's absence as well, and I'm going to have to sell.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to sell as well, just for that. I mean, based on Cowing alone, Shane was a dynamic player for the Wildcats. Arguably a top 25 receiver in college football at that point.
Oh, yeah.
Over the last couple of years in terms of productivity.
One of the top
And
10 ever in receiving yards in college football history.
yeah, I mean, there you go, right there. And obviously, the last 2 years at Arizona, and we saw that in his first game when they played San Diego State. In that heat fest that I was
you were there.
reminiscing.
Yeah,
I was there. I was back in San Diego this past weekend and kind of reminiscing of how, I mean, it would talk about a miserable day. One of my buddies who I was with at both games, he made a great point. He said, I was at the hottest football game I've ever been to in San Diego and the coldest football game I've ever been to in Las Vegas for the Vegas Bowl.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you think about it, Arizona fans, think about it. The hottest football game you've ever been to. If you were at that San Diego game, 100 degrees with 90% humidity, it's up there or thereabouts.
Was that the game they ran out of ice at the?
Yeah.
They
ran out of ice before the game. It was a disaster. And then you look at the Vegas Bowl where there's snow on the ground and nobody knew how to dress. At least I didn't. Freezing. I had a friend that caught pneumonia after that game, apparently.
Oh, really?
Because he just didn't dress well enough.
But totally worth it, right?
For me, it was. I'll be honest. All right. As far as this receiver unit goes, I think losing McLaughlin and losing Cowing, you cannot replace them.
No.
McMillan should be better than he was last year, so I expect that to be a thing. But we don't know the depth. Is Montana Lamonius Craig going to make that jump? He's not Jacob Cowing. I don't think we've seen anything that shows that he can be. So I think this is actually a noticeable downgrade, Shane. I don't think this is just a downgrade. Romello Murphy from Old Dominion, I mean, a nice pickup. Still, downgrade for sure. All right, let's talk about the offensive line. And I absolutely love the fact that Arizona was able to keep 4 of their 5 offensive linemen from last year, minus Jordan Morgan, who went in the first round of the Packers. So despite losing Morgan, you have to kind of make this one a bye, right?
Well, and you had to be excited as a Packers fan to see Morgan go to Green Bay.
If he's any good in the pros, yes.
Well, think about Eric, how many teams are returning 4 out of 5 offensive linemen whose coaches stayed at the school, and Arizona's returning 4 out of 5 with a coaching change. That is a testament to Brent Brennan and his staff and what they've done. Jordan Morgan was arguably, we just talked about Cowing and McLaughlin, but he was arguably the biggest loss for Arizona from last year. But I'm going to still buy because they were, like you said, they returned all their other starters. They did an outstanding job in boosting their depth at the position through the transfer portal. I'm excited to see Wendell Moe in particular, to see him continue to progress. Jonah Savonaya, I'll get it eventually. Has the potential. He has potential to be a first-round pick as well. So I think this is probably the strongest overall offensive position for Arizona in terms of looking at last year to this year. Easy buy, even though they lost a first-round guy.
I mean, I think this is a buy just because you've seen guys improve from where they were last year.
Yeah.
You knew Jordan Morgan was a stud, but now you got Savonaya, who's a potential first-round pick. You've got Wendell Moe, you've got Polito, you've got Baker at center. Magnuson has played as well. This is probably a top 15 offensive line in college football.
Yeah.
So I don't think we could have said that we definitely couldn't have said that going into last year. As far as Arizona was concerned. So yeah, I'm gonna make this a buy, and I think this might be the strongest unit on the team, Shane. I really, in fact, it's probably an easy buy in that regard. That this unit, if they stay healthy, is going to keep Fafita fairly, clean in the pocket and allow Arizona to be dynamic on offense.
Yeah, the one thing that does concern me is we did see in the Alamo Bowl that the O-line struggle a bit at times, and Noah Fafita coming, facing pressure before he had any time to do anything with the ball, and Jordan Morgan sat out that game, so it concerns me a little bit. But I think collectively this unit, I don't think you can understate at the college level or at the pro level how important it is to have that cohesion, the same guys back together. So as long as the coaching's there and the guys have been working hard during the off season, I think that they're all going to collectively improve, and I think they're in very good shape at that position.
Well, are they going to be in as good a shape on defense? That's the question. We'll take a gander at that and special teams and coaching after we hear from one of our sponsors.
Wildcat Country? Chris Gronkowski here, and I'm at the Ice Shaker Warehouse, proud sponsor of the Wildcat Country podcast. And I got something new and exciting to show you. We're talking about the 4D printed University of Arizona shaker bottles with the Legacy Championships on it. Check it out now at iceshaker.com.
Wildcat Country is very proud to be brought to you by Harrah's Auction Casino, which is the only Valley casino with Caesars Rewards, the player's card that pays for Vegas and more. In fact, the reward credits you earn with Caesars Rewards can be redeemed for hotel stays, dining, and more at 50 destinations across the country, including Las Vegas, Lake Tahoe, New Orleans, and dozens of others. Sign up, play, and earn Caesars Rewards only at Harrah's Auction Casino. One card, 50 destinations to enjoy your perks. And don't forget that Shane and I will be out there at least once during the football season. We will do a post-game show out there. We will make our bets before the game. We'll just be hanging out watching. So we hope you will join us, and we will give you ample notice with that.
We got to figure out which game we're going to go to. That's the problem, though, is we don't know what a lot of the time these games start, and we got to plan ahead. I got a kid. We got to get a sitter. And so, we'll definitely get out there. I'm excited about it. But the game that we will, and it'll be a road game because you go to all the home games because you're the best. In fact, I'll just mention real quick. I was talking to the coworker today who was a U of A fan and alum, and he listened to our show last week, and he said, "Your co-host, he goes to all the games. Does he live in Tucson?" He said, "No, he lives in Scottsdale." And he's like, "Wow, that is like." And he said he's been there through all the bad. And he said that is dedication. I think he even used the term glutton for punishment. But it's like you are as diehard as they come. But yeah, we'll pick a road game to do a live post game reaction at the casino, and we'll promote it, and hopefully some of you can come down and join us and be on the live stream with us.
If I were to take a bet, I'd say probably one of the 2 November games, UCF or TCU, because they're more likely to be during the day. But we'll see. We'll kind of look at the schedule. BYU on October 12th is one of them. So Kansas State on a Friday night, probably not. Then there's Utah a couple weeks later. That could be one of them, September, I think, 28th. So that could we'll talk about that, but we'll give you ample notice on that. All right, let's get back to it on defense here, Shane. Defensive line. It's been complete turnover. And it kind of was last year. We didn't know what was going to happen with Arizona, but they ended up being pretty darn productive. And now you lost, Deuce Davis goes to Washington. Bill Norton goes to Texas. You lost Upshaw, went to the pros.
Yep.
I mean, where do you stand with these guys?
Yeah, I think this is the position I think most people would sell at the moment, at least the most readily. And I'll throw myself into that group. This is, again, like you said, for the second straight year, it's almost an entirely new group. Arizona is replacing 9 defensive linemen who were on scholarship last year. They added 5 transfers that can maybe help give Arizona the same kind of rotation they had last year, because that was a big advantage for them last year, is Johnny Nansen and the defense. They were able to rotate guys out and keep them fresh without really much of a drop-off in play at all. And that was remarkable. Not only that they had a good defensive line, but they had that depth as well. Cyrus Durham is kind of interesting to me because he's a JUCO transfer who had a ridiculously good freshman year. Obviously, the FBS is a whole new animal, but I think on paper, this unit has the potential, again, just like last year's, to be as close to as good as it was last year. But it's a lot of new players, a different coaching staff. It's going to take a while. I'm definitely going to have to take a believe it when I see it approach with the D-line. But for now, I absolutely have to sell because you just don't know what you're getting with these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely, as you said, definitely a sell here. Trey Smith is an interesting pickup from San Jose State. Kevon Darton from Syracuse. And then they got the kid from Stanford who, interesting, you got Chuba Mae who comes in, I think, from UC Davis. You got some players there, but we don't know. It's an unknown quantity. I think it's also a significant downgrade. And the thing that made Arizona's defense go last year was the fact the defensive line worked.
Yeah.
And we just don't know. This is the one unit on the team outside of punter, let's say. You just don't know if it's going to work.
Yeah, football's still a simple game. You win the battle in the trenches and you win the turnover battle, you're going to win almost every single time. Yeah. And I think Arizona's in very good position, like we just talked about, on the offensive side of the ball in terms of up front. But on defense, we're gonna have to wait and see. We'll see if these guys get pushed around or if they end up if Dwayne Akeen is and the assistants have them ready for to take on some tough Big 12 teams, especially early in the season.
On the other hand, though, Shane, at linebacker, this team is really good. Jacob Manu is probably first team all conference. And Dwayne Akina came out today and said Traden Stukes is one of the most talented players that he's ever coached on defense. Now, you can kind of consider him, is he part of the secondary? Is he a linebacker? For this particular version, we'll consider whatever you want to consider. I'm going to put him at linebacker. Then you have Justin Flo, and you just don't know what to expect from him. A guy that was a highly touted recruit that kind of didn't show a lot last year. Can he be an impact player? I feel pretty good about this unit, and they are a buy for me.
I'm going to buy, although a bit more reluctantly. Arizona definitely has more continuity at linebacker than they do on defensive line, especially with Manu and Flo returning. They did lose Martell Irby, who also played in the secondary, but also played at the linebacker position as well. And then they lost 3 other guys from last year's rotation too. So, like you alluded to, I'm really interested to see if Flo can become the guy that Oregon thought he was when he originally signed there out of high school. And if Danny Gonzalez, who I think is a fantastic hire for Arizona at that position, I think that was almost, I don't want to go too far above, too much hyperbole, but I think that was a great hire for Arizona. If Danny Gonzalez can get the most out of him, Justin Flo, I think that's going to make a big difference. And then Tay Brown has a lot of potential too. So I'm more confident at that position than certainly than with the defensive line. But I think there's also still some questions that need to be answered during training camp, especially as far as depth goes.
Yeah. So you're right. Brown is an interesting player. And the fact that Manu, we know, is a star in the make. The guy is a playmaker. Yeah. He's not Scooby Wright, and nobody probably will be, but
he's a different kind of athlete, but yeah.
But he's a gutty he's a guy, a max effort guy, which is what Scooby was.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, there's just some guys in the field, like Justin Flo is not a max effort guy. He's not.
He's a max intensity guy, but yeah, he just hasn't been there on the field, yeah.
But Justin Flo has more talent than probably and most people on the roster outside of McMillan, right? Raw talent.
Yeah.
But he's not a max effort guy. And whereas, Manu is. Say what you will, it's true. I feel really good about this unit. And, it's weird that we're praising a guy that you just praised a guy, Shane, who was ASU's defensive coordinator the other year. It's
and he was one of the most like vocal about the rivalry too. He called Arizona the no 200 gang because of the Prop 200 that went, I could go into another time. But yeah, he was very much a proponent of making a big deal about the rivalry. Now he's on the other side. We've seen that. Obviously Bobby Wade's returning to Arizona after coaching at ASU. We've seen Arizona coaches go the other way. So it happens a lot more frequently with coaches than it does with players. I know how you feel about players jumping from one team to the other.
All right, but I'm gonna ask you something kind of off topic here.
All right.
Be completely honest. We're all just having a conversation here.
All right.
If your rival, so we'll just say ASU here, were to offer you, for whatever the job was, a decent amount more money, do you take it because it's more money and a better opportunity, and it's against your principles, or do you stick with your principles and say, you know what, I'm going to find that opportunity elsewhere. I cannot work for my rival.
Are you talking about like me, like in the corporate world, or like if ASU offered me like a great, because I'm in communications, if ASU offered me like the great like communications director job and offered to triple my salary?
I'm not saying triple, but let's say like 1.5 times your salary.
1.5 times my salary
in a communications. But would you take it, or was it? Let's say it was an athletic communication. So just for the purpose, not the university itself, but the athletics, and you had to you had to be the mouthpiece for ASU athletics. Could you do it?
The mouthpiece for ASU? Probably not. No. Okay. I think that there's a level where I could possibly work there. I know people who went people who are Arizona Wildcats through and through who did grad school.
Bobby Wade.
And, yeah.
Well, Bobby Wade came from ASU staff.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, but yeah, I will say this in putting together my first book, ASU's athletic department was outstanding in helping me get connect with players and coaches. People aren't going to want to hear that, but they've got a good group there, and now ASU is a little bit different because they're located in the Valley. They have to compete for media attention with all the pro teams, so they have to be a little more gracious. But they didn't have to be with me, and they were. So I appreciate that very much. But can I be like ASU's mouthpiece? I do know there certainly are some people who have taken that jump. I don't think that's something I could do now. I'm not an ASU hater, but I don't think I could do that.
Well, I am.
I know
So,
you're.
okay, you may not.
I know.
Yeah,
I know what your answer is.
Greg Byrne going from ASU student to Arizona athletic director, baffling. Bobby Wade, Danny Gonzalez, Vince Amy, who was an ASU player who was on Arizona's staff at one point. These are, players, Kongaika.
Well, Antonio Pierce, obviously.
Pierce, yeah, another one. I mean, it worked out for him. He got an NFL head coaching job.
Yeah.
Eventually, good for him. The whole thing to me, at some point, I mean, I couldn't do it. And any player that goes from one to the other is sick in my.
I'm a little bit more with you on the player thing, even though I don't think it should be banned like you do. The coaches, though, I mean, the life of an assistant football coach, basically is nomadic. You have to go with whoever pays you. You got to support your family, and so I get it a lot more from that perspective. Although I will say this, and I promise I'm not trying to plug my books, but in my my Rich Rod versus Graham, I asked, like, I think the last question they asked Todd Graham, who was also very gracious with his time, like, could you ever coach at Arizona? And he said, not even if I only had a dime in my pocket, because he lives and breathes that rivalry. But he was a head coach, and so maybe it's a little bit different. Assistant coaches, you're here, you're there 1 year, there somewhere else 2 years. I think that's a little bit different. The head coach, you kind of live and breathe it a little bit more. You got to, speak to the alumni. They instill those feelings in you. So I get it a little more from the head coaching perspective.
Head coach, assistant coach, I still, when you were in a locker room and you were hating on another team, and then you go to that team and it's your rival, especially an in-state rival.
But we see that at the pro level all the time, though. I mean, you see
the pros are different, Shane. And I'm gonna go into a little tangent here.
Okay. I think we already are, but go ahead.
Well, we are, yeah. When you say we, I feel like a person can say we because of college, because if you went to Arizona, if you have invested in the program, you're part of that program in a way.
Sure.
The pro team, I've never said we, because I've never felt like personally a part of a program. Yeah. I've never felt part of the Cubs or the Packers, who I root for, or the Sun. I mean, what do you think about that?
I get your point. I do think, though, that if you're buying the ticket, if you're contributing financially, because I understand that it's a much bigger contribution if you go to college somewhere. But with pro teams, if you're buying the tickets and buying the merchandise, I feel like you have it's almost like you are sort of investing in the company without any return except a potential emotional return, which often lets you down, especially if you're an Arizona sports fan. Arizona pro sports is what I'm talking about. Yeah. So I think using the we is okay in that regard too. I know some people feel about it, and I think it's probably a bit stronger for college because of that reason, because you live and breathe the university, at least if you attended on campus for several years. But I'm okay with it at the pro sports level too.
Okay. I just wanted to touch. I mean, it's Wildcat country. We go where we want to go. All right. Let's talk about the secondary, buy or sell. They played obviously so well in the bowl game, but you lose Martell Irby, who was one of the stars of that game. And remember that interview that he gave to ESPN afterwards? We won't forget that one for a while. Buy or sell this unit, Shane? Are you more optimistic going into this year or less?
Well, Tacario Davis's return definitely has me buying here. If they had lost both Davis and Ephesians Prysock, who went to Washington, I don't think I would, even with the other guys who were returning. But Tacario Davis, Gunnar Maldonado, Dalton Johnson, Traden Stukes returning, all those guys, that's massive. And certainly you have to think Dwayne Akina's retention had a lot to do with that. And they have some decent transfers who have a chance to do well in Prysock's place at the other cornerback position opposite Davis. Marquis Groves Killebrew, who transferred from Louisville, could be that guy. Maybe Demetrius Freeney from your parents' alma mater, Miami. I think they're in. And I'm interested to see how that all shakes out in training camp. But that's one of the big battles to watch, is that cornerback position. But I think they're in outstanding shape at secondary with Davis's return and with those other guys. And you could argue that this is their strongest overall position entering the season. At least I think it is on defense, and you can make a case, and I probably would make the case, even with Prysock leaving, that this is probably their strongest overall position along with offensive line.
All right. I like don't get me wrong. I like the unit, but losing Prysock, if you would have had Prysock and Takario Davis, albeit that they improved, this one's a tough call for me.
Yeah.
I'm going to say a very, very slight sell.
Okay.
Because Prysock had big potential. And you could have had, you have a lockdown corner in Davis who's a future first, second round pick, something like that. As far as Prysock goes, I mean, this was another guy that big, good size, could have been you could have had a top 10 unit if those guys had stayed around. Maldonado, was a lot of people were hard on him, but then look what he did in the bowl game. He was fantastic.
Yeah. Toward the end of the season, he really came on. He had a big game against ASU and against Oklahoma.
Yeah. Now, Dalton Johnson, also good bowl game. Stukes, if you want to consider him in the star position, part of the secondary linebacker. Yeah. It's close. This one's really close. This one really gave me kind of a test. So I'll stick with your answer and kind of take the cop out on this one. All right. Let's talk about special teams. To me, Tyler Loop, very good kicker. We love to see Arizona having good kickers. Great. However, at punter, losing Kyle Ostendorf's a problem.
Yep. Yeah.
I don't know what to make of it. Yeah.
No, well, I'm going to buy, even though they have some turnover here. Getting Tyler Loop back is massive. And having a kicker who's not only accurate in general, but can make clutch kicks could be the difference between a 6 to 7 win season or an 8 to 9 win season. Legitimately, especially in a conference with as much parity in the Big 12 as the Big 12 has, and you're likely to have some games that come down to the wire. That could make the difference between a win or two. They do lose Ostendorf, who became a very reliable punter for Arizona. They actually have a pretty big competition, I guess, at that spot going into training camp, including Tyler Loop, who could possibly end up getting that job. They have a new long snapper. And then Jacob Cowing, you did mention this. Jacob Cowing was Arizona's primary punt returner last season. But I guess it depends on how you look at it. If you compare the overall unit to last year, I guess I would have to sell. But my confidence in the unit is still strong because I think the kicker position out of all of those is still the most important. And bringing back one of the most accurate kickers in the country, and statistically the most, at this point, knock on wood, the most accurate kicker in Arizona football history, that is a massive deal.
All right. I would agree about bringing back the kicker. Losing the punter is a problem. Field position is a big deal in college. As I've always said, Shane, from my first time on the show, if I were to be a coach, the first positions I would recruit are kicker and a punter. And we don't know. I really thought Brent Brennan would bring in a punter in the offseason. He didn't do it. And it's kind of disappointing in that regard. Loop's great. To be honest with you, I don't really care about the punt returner unless you have a Mike Thomas or Antoine Cason from back in the day. Yeah. How often does Arizona take one to the house? Yeah. I just don't fumble. I mean, that's all I think about is every time a ball goes in the air and I don't see an Arizona player fair catch it, words come out of my mouth. An expletive is the second word.
Well, sometimes even when they do, you hold your breath until they actually secure the ball in their hands, right?
I would almost just rather watch the ball hit the ground and let it roll and see what happens than watch some of these guys try to catch it in traffic.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, so just saying that. All right, let's talk about coaching. I don't know what to make of Brent Brennan. Is he a better strategic coach than Jed Fish? What's your take on the staff? On paper, are you buying or selling this stuff?
I might surprise you a little bit. I'm going to buy. The names aren't as flashy or as well connected as Fish and his staff were. I think Brent Brennan's going to do an outstanding job. He's already proven himself to be fantastic in terms of building relationships, which is evident by the number of guys returning to the team after the coaching change. I mean, you can talk NIL all you want. That Arizona doesn't bring back that many guys without Brennan doing what he did. We're going to have to see how Dino Babers settles in an offensive coordinator, but it's hard to argue with his experience. Dwayne Akina's return is big. Adding Danny Gonzalez, like I said, at linebackers coach. Alonzo Carter has already done an amazing job at recruiting at the running back position. I think just like Brent Brennan, a lot of the coaches he brought over from San Jose State were just waiting for an opportunity to prove themselves at a power school. And I think the recruiting is going to reflect that ultimately. as I said this way too many times. I'm a little nervous to see how the new staff and players from last year are going to gel when it's actually time to play the games. So I'll buy a little more in the long term than in the short term, assuming he can keep the staff together. I don't have very much doubt, though, that this team is going to be very well coached.
All right, I'm going to actually buy it, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I had concerns on this show often about Jed Fish's play calling.
Yeah.
Now, I think the unknown at this point with Babers, he didn't call plays his last few years at Syracuse, but Brent Brennan always got the most, seemingly, or a lot of times got the most out of out of a team that didn't have the most high caliber players. He's a player's coach, and I love the fact that he has, along with Babers and Danny Gonzalez, experience, head coach experience. Dwayne Aquina, one of the most experienced defensive coordinators in college football. I really do like the staff. Alonzo Carter, recruiter. I know I'm forgetting some other guys on the staff. It's a really good staff on paper. And I know it's recency bias plays into it. And some of you are thinking, you guys are just saying that because you've had them on the show. No, I really think that this staff, from top to bottom, with their experience, what they've done in the college football realm, better than what Jed Fish did.
And the words that Matt Moreno told us a few weeks ago have stuck with me since he said them, which is that under Brent Brennan, San Jose State was in the mix for a lot of pretty good players, like high-end 3-star guys, even some 4-star guys. They didn't land many of them because they're San Jose State and they can't compete with the power schools. But they were in the final 3, the final 4 of a lot of those guys because they made such a great pitch. San Jose State of all teams. So logic would suggest you go to a school like Arizona, which is not, a blue blood football program by any means, but a power school nonetheless, and a program on the rise. And maybe they're going to start being able to land some of those guys. I think you're already seeing a little bit of that in the recruiting classes they're putting together. Do they have any 4-star guys yet? No. And I do think they're going to have to do at least reasonably well this year to land some of those guys who are going to take a wait and see approach. But I think the recruiting is going to be there. I think we've already seen it. I think they've done a good job plugging the holes that they have going into this season. And I think that as time goes by, that's only going to improve, and they're going to, I don't expect like top 20 national classes, but I think top 40 national classes year in and year out are a very real possibility.
So as a team, Shane, going into last year, we said best case scenario, probably 7-5, right? We agreed with that. If all went well in the regular season, we said, okay, Arizona can get to 7-5.
Mm-hmm.
And they got to 9-3 in the regular season, and obviously won the bowl game. Best case scenario. And obviously, we'll probably revisit this as camp goes along, making sure there are no injuries and stuff. What is the best case scenario in terms of record for you for the Wildcats? And in the worst case, we talked about this a little bit last week, but just give another answer here.
Well, and obviously, we're talking about the realm of possibility, because if we just did best case, we'd say they win the whole thing and they're national champions. And we don't think that's going to happen. I'm thinking realistically, absolute best case is the stars align, they remain injury free, and they find a way to navigate through the Big 12 with maybe just one loss. And they win the Big 12 championship game, and they maybe get to the national quarterfinals.
Okay.
I think that is the top 0.1% of realm of possibility.
Okay. And what's the downside? I mean, injury, not factoring injury, Shane. You can't.
Okay. So I'm not factoring injury, but we're assuming that their stars are going to stay healthy for the majority of the season. Then I think worst case would be 500. If something just doesn't click between the coaching staff and the players, and it's just not there, and the guys, who were loyal to the program, maybe they realize this just isn't a good fit for me, and they realize it a little too late. That's my concern, is that maybe 6-6 going to, I think, a worst case scenario, injuries notwithstanding, would be a low level bowl game. I think absolute best case would be making a college football playoff appearance and maybe getting a win there, but at least getting there, I think, is best case.
To me, non-injury related, worst case 7-5, best case 10-2, and an appearance in the Big 12 championship game.
Okay.
Let's see if they could win that game. Listen, I'd love to see them in the Fiesta Bowl on New Year's Eve. We talked about that last week.
Mm-hmm.
If they were to win the Big 12, that's probably where they would end up. And you'd probably see them against the likes of an SEC team or the Ohio State, Oregon loser, let's say. But one can dream. For now, it's a really good team. If Brent Brennan picks up where Jed left off, it's a team that could win. It should win. Realistically, I have them between 8 or 9 games, right around there.
Not counting a bowl?
No, not counting a bowl.
Okay.
Yeah, I could see him winning 10 games with a bowl game again.
Yeah.
I could see that.
I think 8 wins is a reasonable expectation with this roster, injuries notwithstanding. I think that is reasonable considering where they came from last year and the talent. Again, I think I mentioned this last week. I think Brett Brennan is going to be maybe a victim of his own success in that regard to a certain extent because he's been so successful in retaining so many top players. The expectations for this team remain high, not as high as they would have if Jedd Fisch had stayed. I think they'd be top 10 preseason, or at least 15. I think they're borderline top 25 just mainly because of the coaching change. But because he has done such a good job retaining Noah Fifita and Tetaroa McMillan and so many guys on defense, the expectations among Arizona fans are going to be higher than just a low-level bowl game. They're going to expect this team to at least compete for a Big 12 championship and be in contention for the last month of the season.
Coming up next, let's talk about a year we haven't yet discussed this summer. One that I would say rivals what we saw last year, might have even been better here in Wildcat Country.
Discover more Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino.
Hi folks, here are your drinks.
Where having fun means racking up reward credits with the Caesars Rewards loyalty program that can be redeemed for food, free play, hotel stays, and more. Not only here in the city of Maricopa, but also at more than 50 Caesars properties coast to coast. From Harrah's Las Vegas to Caesars Palace in Atlantic City. What are you waiting for? Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino, the official sponsor of Play.
All right, Shane, last segment, good breakdown of the roster this year heading into training camp, which starts this week. Let's talk about the 2014-15 Arizona Wildcat season, 10 years ago. One of the
How is that possible?
It's crazy to think about. One of the great years in Arizona sports history that could have been. It was great.
Yeah.
What are one or two memories that stand out from a really good football and a really good basketball year?
So I went to 3. Well, no, I actually went to 4, counting the Fiesta Bowl. But in the regular season, I went to 3 Arizona football games in Tucson. The first 2 were games that came down to a Casey Scourin field goal. The game against USC when Arizona was 5-0. And if you remember, that was a crazy finish. Arizona was down 8.
I remember it very well.
They were down 8. They got a touchdown, went for 2 in the last minute, didn't get the 2-point conversion, so they had to do an onside kick. They did. They recovered it. I want to say Caleb Jones recovered it. I don't remember for sure. But then they got in field goal range. Casey Scourin drills a field goal, but USC had called a timeout. The second one, the one that counted, he shanked, and the USC won, and that ended Arizona's undefeated season.
Remember?
But fast forward a few weeks later against Washington, day game, kind of the same scenario. Arizona gets a mulligan in kind of the same fashion that Miami gave Georgia Tech a mulligan by not taking a knee when they could have just taken a knee and run out the clock or very close to it. Washington runs a regular play, run the ball, they fumble. It's very close. The play gets reviewed. I remember at the stadium when they were reviewing to see if the ruling should stand. The song that was playing over the stadium was "Let It Be."
I love that. Love it.
Well, you know who it was by. And then of course they said the ruling stands. They end up kicking the game when Casey Scourin gets his redemption. It was a long field goal try, like 45 yards, but he drilled it. And Arizona wins that game. And then of course I was actually in the press box. I was in the stands for the first 2 games, but I was in the press box for the ASU game. And of course that was, I remember just even with the enclosed press box, how loud and the press box shaking when Scooby Wright forces that fumble in the first opening minutes and Anthony Lopez returns over a touchdown and Arizona takes the lead. Crazy game all the way through. And Arizona, everyone remembers the way it ended, but it was one of the best games in the history of the rivalry. Arizona wins. They go on to the Pac-12 championship game, and we don't have to talk about the rest of the season.
Nope.
If it was a movie, it would just end there after beating ASU and Rich Rod celebrating with his family. But crazy season that came out of nowhere with a freshman quarterback in Anu Solomon, a great freshman running back in Nick Wilson, great receivers, and of course Scooby Wright having racking up national awards. It was an amazing year, at least if you just count the regular season. It was.
All right, let's start with football. One game that I will never forget as long as I live is September 20th, 2014. California was up 39. I think it was 39-13 going into the fourth quarter.
Didn't even touch on
said,
that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And I said it was a whiteout. It was the first whiteout that I can ever remember being a part of for a football game. And I said to my buddies, I said, well, I don't want to leave just yet, just in case. And I have this kind of rule when I go to football games. You don't leave unless the game and the spread have been decided or whatever. It's always been kind of my policy, right?
All right. Yeah.
So, Jared Goff, the future number one pick of the was on the Cal Bears, now on the Detroit Lions, formerly on the Rams, was just throwing all over Arizona. And the Wildcats started to make it close, and they got within, I think it was 4, something like that. It was 45-43. And they got the ball at their own 20-yard line with 30 seconds left. And then we remember the Hail Mary. And I remember where I was. I remember watching it and just the elation. And the fact that there were maybe 10,000 people in the seats at the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we'll never forget it, if not less. I mean, it was as empty as I can remember Arizona Stadium. People will say that they were there. I have pictures in my phone from after the game. People my buddies thought I was crazy for wanting to stay, but I said, nope, I'm not driving all the way down here. I don't want to miss what could be amazing. And that it was. Then we saw USC, I think was a few weeks later. That was kind of a bummer 3 weeks later. You talked about Washington. That was great. The ASU game, I will never forget. So excited for that. 2 highly ranked teams, number 11 against number 13. I don't know that we'll see an Arizona State game like that anytime soon, maybe again in our lifetime. In
the last 40 years, there's only been 2 times that both Arizona and ASU were ranked when they played each other.
Wow.
2014 and before that. Do you remember the year before that? Chuck Cecil.
Really?
1986.
Wow.
Yeah.
When
ASU was undefeated until they played Arizona, and Arizona was, I think, 20th or so. Yeah.
The other thing I want to talk about, the basketball team. I mean, they were 28-3 in the regular season. They got to 34-3.
Mm-hmm.
Dominated in the Pac-12 championship game. Beat Oregon by 28, which you just don't see. That was a lot of fun at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. And then it was Wisconsin. Yeah, I mean, that was the first Wisconsin. That one will probably hurt more than any basketball game that I think up there. That loss right up there with any basketball game. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, because you think that the stars are aligned perfectly to get some payback and to make things right, and then Sam Decker, who I think is playing in the British Basketball League now, just goes off. And I mean, that's the thing at the NCAA tournament. If someone just gets ridiculously hot, there's nothing that you can do.
No.
And so in Wisconsin, and I will say this: the only time have ever rooted for Duke in my life was when they played Wisconsin in the national championship game that year, because I just couldn't stand to see Frank Kaminsky and those guys win a championship. And so I was happy. It was kind of like when the Patriots, I can't stand the Patriots, but I hate the Seahawks more. I rooted for the Patriots to beat the Seahawks. And so I was thrilled when Malcolm Butler made that interception. Kind of felt the same way when Duke beat Wisconsin, even though I felt dirty about it. I couldn't root for Wisconsin to win that. But yeah, that wasn't the latest. That was the most recent example of Elite Eight heartbreak in which has been.
No, there was one the year after. There's one the year after that.
The
15-16 season, I think, was a problem there when they lost to Wisconsin the second time.
No, that was the second time.
Oh, that was
2014. Yeah, that was Stanley Johnson. Wasn't that 14-15? That was Stanley Johnson's year. The year before that, I think, was Wisconsin.
You're right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Frank Kaminsky went off in 14. That was the Nick
right.
Johnson block charge situation.
Yep.
The year after that, Arizona was the 2 seed.
Good
Wisconsin
point.
was the 1, and Decker went off. So yeah, that was the most. There were 5 instances in which Arizona's gotten to the Elite Eight since they last made the Final Four, and they've all been painful in their own way, and that was the most recent example.
Yeah, I mean, this was the second most painful. Sorry, I was getting that confused with the 13-14 one.
It all blends together.
I mean, that one, the one that happened in March of 2014 was about as painful as it gets. That one, you just thought that Arizona was going to get their revenge. At least I did. I mean, this was a team that bounced back. They were really good. TJ McConnell kisses the floor in his last game at McHale. You're like, it's all set up for a Final Four.
Brandon Ashley's healthy.
Yeah, and you just, I mean, yep.
Sometimes things just don't go according to script.
But 2014-15 was a great year. Last year, we had a great year, Arizona football and basketball. Can 2024-25 be even better than both of those? I'm kind of excited to see, Shane. I know it's a high bar, but exciting times ahead.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Here's the fun. Would you rather? Would you rather, if you could pick one for the next season, would you rather Arizona football get to the college football playoff or Arizona men's basketball finally get back to the Final Four?
Um, that's a tough one.
I know football is your big passion. I'll just say for me, I just want the monkey off my back, and I want to see Arizona get back to the Final Four.
Here's why I'm going to say football, because the game would be in Glendale. And I just want to see that.
Yeah.
And for me to see Arizona play in a postseason game in Glendale with a chance to move along to progress towards the national championship and be a top 12 team. I mean, Final Four would be great. And it's really, you can't go wrong with either. You would say Final Four for that reason, getting the monkey off your back. For me, I'm going just because to be a part of the Fiesta Bowl this year, I'd probably go with the college football playoff.
Fair enough. No, not at all. Fair enough.
Well, good show, Shane. Hey, listen, August is coming. Training camp is coming. We're going to have great guests, and then it's football season, and then it's basketball season. A lot of great things to come on Wildcat Country. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks as always for listening. As I always like to say, bear down.